We all need a massage at some point or other, don't we?
Amen.
Yeah.
You should have gotten up and danced in the back with me. I don't need a massage. I'm loving it and moving. Yes.
So this is Father's Day. And the other day I found myself in the greeting card aisle. I can't remember if it was CVS or Walgreens. And don't those Father's Day cards usually echo all of the things we idealistically consider to be a good father? And although I saw a lot of that, I didn't see anything that quite fit with my dad. He's been gone a long time. But you know, it gives, even though many of our fathers have been gone, we think about, well, what card would I want to send them? But there were some really bizarre ones also this year. And I'll just share a few of those with you. One of the most bizarre was the image of Darth Vader. And you open it to Happy Father's Day to a man who brings order to his corner of the galaxy. Say it ain't so. Another one that I couldn't quite get, I still can't get to this day, was the image of this donkey with sunglasses. But you opened it up and it was one with sounds. You know, sometimes you get a song, and this one was just a hee-haw, hee-haw over and over again. I don't get it, maybe you do. Maybe some of your fathers spoke to you that way. And probably my least favorite was the one that said, Happy Father's Day, enjoy the places that are so special to you this day. And you open it up and there's a 3D image of a toilet and a cooler of beer. Well, my dad didn't fit in with any of those, and I hope yours didn't either. He was a beautiful man, and he was generous, and he was flawed, just as we all are. I remember as a little girl how my own father, he built things to enrich our lives and so that he could play with us and teach us. Some of these were pretty wonderful. He and my uncle together built a pool table. And they built a ping pong table that they could put over it. And that's pretty impressive, building a slate pool table. That occupied our basement, and as a result, I was able to earn spending money after my own training during college, playing pool. He also built a courtyard in our backyard, where in the summer we could play paddle tennis and do some shuffleboard. And in the winter, he would line that courtyard with a thick plastic and give it kind of an edge. And he would stand in the freezing, freezing weather in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we lived, with this garden hose, and he filled it with water so that we could learn to skate, and we would skate the next morning because it would be frozen over. And I remember the sacrifices he made to give me music lessons. We all benefit from that. And give my sister art lessons that we all benefited from. My dad worked in a television station. He was an engineer. But he exposed me to some of his associates who were local personalities or news broadcasters. My dad's avocation was writer. He wrote the great American novel, and he wrote a screenplay. None of these were ever published, but I still have the manuscripts to this day. And so maybe it's no wonder that I decided to get my degree in journalism broadcasting. As a child, my own dad was my best friend. But in my latter teens, and maybe this happened to some of you as well, he became more and more annoying. And that's because I began to see more of his flaws than the wonderful things. Things like his racial prejudice. Things like his support for Richard Nixon. The Vietnam War. His tendency to debate every issue and usually take the opposing side of what I believed in. I didn't treat him so well back then. Then somewhere in my 30s, somehow, we made peace and we started connecting with the heart again. And that allowed us to have honest conversations that allowed each of us to grow, especially me. Dad died in 1997, and he was my best friend again at that point. I never asked my dad, what does being a father mean to you? But I had a pretty good idea based on his interactions with me and my sister and my brother, and what made him joyful and what made him sad as well. But he's not here to ask that question of. And so I decided to ask that question of a number of other men that I know and I've been close to, or maybe even not so close to, but I wanted to know their take on it. In each case, their fatherhood circumstances are very, very different. But the question was the same. What does being a father mean to you? Some of you may have that on your minds as well. The first one to respond was my friend Ken, who lives in Buffalo, New York. Ken has a young grown son and daughter, and he wrote to me. He said, "The most profound thing about fatherhood for me was realizing that I was literally helping to shape the lives of a couple of brand new human beings who were observing my every action. And even when they were too small to verbally articulate their observations, they were taking in everything that I said and everything that I did. And I realized that I had a pretty serious responsibility to serve as a role model for them, because I was impacting them not just for now, but for life." Takes that seriously. Then I got something shared from a fellow named Michael. Michael is a brand new father. He is the father to Nora, and they live in Colorado, and Nora is less than 8 weeks old, and this is his first time. He said, "Being a father means being selfless. It means responsibility. It means exhaustion. It means caring about something more deeply than you ever thought was possible. It means laughing at everything, everything. It means supporting mom in any way that she needs, and it means loving baby with all my heart." I think he's going to be a good dad. Good for you, Michael. And then there was Rock. I sat down with Rock. He's the father to 5-year-old Jesse. Rock spoke about his own childhood experience and how that informed what he wants to be as a father, and he takes it really seriously. When he was Jesse's age, 5, both parents were alive and they were both alcoholics. And his father was what he called a drop-in dad. He was around sometimes, but he was pretty uninvolved. But after a serious car accident that he experienced, and after a friend got his father into AA, he stopped drinking. But Rock's mother didn't go that route, and they were divorced. And with sobriety, his father took a different approach to fatherhood and to life itself. He would spend every Saturday with his son, the whole day, doing something of interest. Rock didn't always receive this well because he was a kid and he had his mother who was having her own issues. But by his teen years, his dad had remarried, and with that remarriage, he eventually moved away. Didn't keep in touch as much, had a different life, and there were many years that they weren't in touch at all. But 10 years ago, they reconnected, and Rock's dad had a chance to meet Jesse before he passed away. Rock said, "I always knew that my dad loved me, but sometimes he showed it in different ways, in different stages of my life. But I don't want to affect Jesse the way that the negative things that I experienced as a child affects me." He said, "I discipline Jesse and I'm direct with him, but always and clearly I do it with love and mindfully." Because Rock is a hands-on dad. He picks his son up every day from school. He takes him to Bible camp. He involves him even when he plays music sometimes. He lets Jesse be a kid, and he encourages it. But he's begun to speak to him like he would speak to an adult, and his son responds to that in positive ways. And Rock takes a lot of delight in that. And he said freely, "I really have no idea what it means to be a father, still after 5 years." But he also admitted that Jesse, with him in his life, he now feels complete. He has a sense of purpose. He's a satisfied man. It's pretty wonderful. Then I had to sit down with my friend Stephen. Very different situation. Stephen started his conversation with me by saying, "At one time or another, each of my 5 children told me that I was a shitty father. I didn't know where this was going to go. He said that my first fatherhood experience was when I was just 19 years old, and I nearly had a nervous breakdown over my girlfriend's pregnancy. And the prospect also at the same time of being drafted and going to Vietnam. He said my girlfriend thought that abortion might be the best for both of us. So together we flew to Puerto Rico. He said when we got there, I had a lot of misgivings. And together we talked each other out of it. And we flew back home. And we returned to New Jersey, and Noreen went to a home that was run by nuns. And she eventually had the baby, and the baby was adopted. He said, but it always bothered me because I wondered who she was and who she was going to be. Noreen and I never married, but we kind of kept in touch. 19 years later, their daughter Gina got in touch. She wanted to know who our biological mother and father were. She was real hesitant, in particular with her father, Stephen, about intruding in his life. But she finally learned that he wanted to be in her life. He said, so we met, and it was like a dream date. It was wonderful. But she had already evolved as a person. She had her own set of problems and priorities and connections. He said, we stayed in touch, and we still stay in touch today, but I'm her father, I'm not her dad. He had a first marriage, though, and that brought 2 more daughters who were dearly loved, and he was best friends with them when they were little. But the marriage didn't last. And he said, we started to share parenting, 50-50. He said, my life took on the roles of Mr. Mom half the time, and being a pretty cool party guy the rest of the time, with lots of meaningless relationships with lots of women during those years. He said, I took care of my girls, but I was not a good role model. It's pretty honest, isn't it? He said, I decided to change all that with my next marriage. So he was married again. He said, I was committed, and I had a son, and I had a daughter. And I became a different kind of father. It was a new chance for me. I became involved in fostering their talents, their creativity, and their characters. I took a lot of joy in seeing them grow and evolve into really brilliant individuals who I could talk to and even sometimes advise in their younger years. But then he thought, today my role as a father has changed so much. I went from being like this God-like character to these children when they were very, very young, because I was taking care of their every need, whether it was food, or shelter, or advice, or play, or just protecting them and embracing them. But now, I feel like a nuisance. I'm old. I feel irrelevant sometimes. I miss being important in their lives. When your children are young, he said, when they're very young especially, you can't help but feel like you own them, at least in his case. They're helpless and you have to protect and provide everything. But as they grow old, there comes this pain of sometimes feeling they don't need me anymore. And that's hard, but I've come to learn that you still cannot retire from fatherhood. And fatherhood, even today, he said, is different with each of my children. Occasionally I'm still asked for advice, mostly of a mechanical nature. But now it's a privilege to be able to help them out with anything. Anything. I still want to take them under my wing, and I would pick up the pieces for each one of them if that's what they needed. And his last word on that was, because you never let go of being their father. The next little story was from my friend Roger. Roger explained I was never a biological father and never able to legally adopt. Gay men in the 80s and the 90s, at least in Florida, were usually not permitted to, no matter what the circumstances and what the need. He said, but my son, Ronnie, adopted me. I was a gay man in my early 50s and married to my long-term partner. And Ronnie was not much over 21. He was enlisted in the U.S. Coast Guard. He was married, he was straight, he was very self-reliant. But after a chance meeting with me, we latched on to each other, or at least he latched on to me. As a friend and as a father figure, Ronnie had been raised by women, and he never really had a man to talk to and to look up to. Sometime after we'd become close friends, Ronnie and his wife divorced. He came to live with us for a little time, and it was then that he started telling people that I was his dad. That seemed a little strange, but Ronnie meant it when he said that. I was the one he came to for advice or just to talk about life and relationships and career, things like that, the deep and important things. And we developed a deep affection and respect and trust between us. And I decided that if Ronnie wanted me to be his dad, that was okay. That was more than okay. I was honored to be. So I accepted the role of father to this young man, and the whole world really, came to recognize me as Ronnie's dad. So now, nearly 25 years later, our bond is stronger than ever, he said. And it's hard to imagine life before him. And Ronnie has said that it's hard for him to imagine life between me and Norman. We would do anything for him, anything. And Ronnie has said more than once, you are my dad, and I will take care of you as long and whenever you need. I also spoke to my ex-husband, Tom. He's the father of my son, our son, Matt. He said, he didn't give me a lot, but he said, I think that it's more appropriate to call it Dad's Day. He said a lot of fathers never become dads, and it's the dads that spend time and try to guide their kids. Kids need the time and attention of a role model to enhance their lives. He's right. My final story is about my friend John. John is a father, but he never had a chance to be a dad. And when I asked him, what does being a father mean to you, John? He said, that is probably the most difficult question, Marie, that you could have ever asked me. John is 70-ish, early 70s, and he learned not too many years ago that he was a father. He never knew it before. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into all the circumstances of that, but suffice it to say that the prospect of meeting this son that he never knew, he said, I was scared, I was curious, and it just took my breath away. John had the opportunity to meet his only child, who was a grown man of about 50, with children of his own. And that son, he said, is intelligent, he's successful, he's pretty well adjusted, he's generous, and he was open to having John as an extended part of the family. Pretty wonderful. It turned out to be a wonderful gift for him that they're still trying to explore that. They haven't come to terms with all this, but they're getting a feel for what this means. So John was never a dad, but I found that he was pretty realistic and really deep and thoughtful when it came to his view about fatherhood. And he chose to express that to me rather than in his own words, in a reading that he shared with me. It's from a memoir by a fellow named Harry Crews, and it's called A Childhood, Biography of a Place. And this little piece of a reading he shared, I'm going to share with you. It starts with 5-year-old Harry Crews sleepwalking, and he finds himself at night in the dark outside in a cotton field. And after some wild imaginings, he runs back to the dark house, and the reading starts. When I got to the door, I opened it quietly and went down the hall to the little room where I knew Daddy was sleeping on a pallet. It was where he often had to sleep when he came in drunk and out of control, and Mama would not let him into their room. He lay still, dressed, curled up on the quilt spread across the floor, under an open window, through which bright moonlight fell. I sat down beside him and I touched his face, tracing the thick scar of perfect teeth on his flat, high cheekbone. The air in the room was heavy with the sweet smell of bourbon whiskey, and sweat stood on his forehead and darkly stained his shirt. "Daddy," I said. He made a small noise deep in his chest and his eyes opened. "Daddy, I'm scared." He pushed himself onto one elbow and put an arm around me, and he drew me close to him. I could feel the bristle of his beard on my neck, and I trembled, and I tried not to cry. "Show now," he whispered against my ear. "Everybody's scared now and then." "I was in a cotton field," I said, "out there." And he turned his head, and we both looked through the window at the flat, white field of cotton shining under the moon. "You was dreaming, boy," he said, "but you all right now?" "I woke up out there." Now I was crying, not making any noise, but unable to keep the tears from streaming down my face. I pushed my bare feet into the moonlight. "Look," I said, and my feet and the hem of my gown were gray with the dust of the field. He drew back and looked into my eyes, smiling. "You walked in your sleep. It ain't nothing to worry about. You probably got it from me. I was bad to walk in my sleep when I was a boy." And the tears eased back. "You was?" I said. "Done it a lot. Don't mean nothing." I don't know if he was telling the truth, but hearing him say it was something that saying that it was something that he'd done, and that I might have got it from him, that took my fear away. "You lie down here on the pallet with your old daddy and go to sleep. Me and you is all right. We both all right." So I lay down with my head on his thick arm, wrapped in the warm, sweet smell of whiskey and sweat, and I was immediately asleep. You know, John said that he got from this reading that Harry's daddy was a flawed man, just like my own dad. He was subject to uncontrolled appetites, probably a difficult husband, as well as a quarrelsome individual. Remember that thick scar of perfect teeth on his flat, high cheekbone that he probably got from a fight. But even abruptly awakened from a drunken sleep, his daddy was attentive and he was tenderly sympathetic to young Harry. And he reassures him by telling him that his are not unusual actions or thoughts. And he's not alone in all of this, and that they are both all right. And this is the same kind of indulgent love that John remembered from his own father, that I remembered from my dad when I was Harry's age. And so I want to end this by saying, I want to say it. Here's to the fathers in our midst, all of you, and the fathers gone before us. Here's to those perfectly flawed men who have held us and sacrificed for us and listened and disciplined and directed us and loved us. And if he were here today, I thought about what I would say to my father, who obviously I love dearly. And I think I would say, you and I are all right. We're both all right.